Almost every faction in the game runs on some form of money. It's needed for buildings, armies, diplomacy, and almost anything else that pushes the game forward. But what factions are the absolute best at printing cash so fast they're practically swimming in green? Let's take a look and find out. Also, this video is sponsored by Holy, but more on that later. Kicking off the list, we have Zhao Ming. He is a pretty basic Cathayan trade lord. There's honestly not much to say about this guy that isn't already in his faction effects. He's real good at trading and caravans, allowing him to send more cargo earlier, meaning more gold, meaning more rich. It's pretty simple. His position is also pretty advantageous as he can trade with most of the other Cathayan factions, alongside the ogres, Balth, and anyone else who's nearby to the southern border. Now sure, he does have to defend against anyone who comes up from the south, but he can make a lot of gold and friends whilst he does it. Add on the fact that Cathay are an order-tied faction and can be friends with pretty much anyone, meaning trade with more or less anyone, and you have yourself a campaign that can very quickly become a Scrooge McDuck gold swim. He's not getting any higher since caravans are the littlest bit unreliable, especially as the game goes on. Enemy factions just insta-kill them, and if you don't manage to level them up and fill them with elite units, you are shit out luck and can't really get in a roll very easily. Still, if you want to play as a faction in this area of the map with lots of gold, Zhao is your guy. Coming next to Karl himself. In a similar vein, Karl is another of those order-tied landmarks, and as such can take part in an astonishing amount of trade. He obviously has all of the nearby Empire factions he can trade with right from the start, alongside the nearby Bretonnia and even the High Elves once he gets some exploration on the go. Alongside his massive potential income from trade, he's also the easiest in the faction to fully control the Empire through Confederation. His Imperial machinations make it easier than ever to bring all Empire factions to heel and get full control over a vast amount of territory, which of course means a vast amount of income to go with it. Add on the bonuses he gains from the Empire lands being under control, all of the elect counts bonuses, not to mention the endless income from battling everyone since everyone wants to fight the Empire, and you have a faction that does take some time to get going, but once it's moving, it's pretty cracked. I'm not placing Karl any higher since he can be very powerful. It's actually very possible to take some wrong steps and end up in the hole more than you can ever recover. Their rework has certainly made this a lot less likely, but it can still happen and mean they're not the most reliably easy faction to rake in the gold. Tyrion is one of the best order-tied trade lords, but in essence is doing the same as the last two. He's a strong position where he can make lots of friends on Ulthuan for early trade and eventual confederation. He has Bretonnia and the Empire right there to trade with whenever he fancies. He has the insane high elf income buildings which produce more trade resources. Vision over anyone he trades with, meaning you can easily find more trade partners simply by having more trade partners. Plus, if someone isn't cooperating, he can always use a bit of influence to bring them on side. They also have certain special traits for lords and heroes which can make more money just by existing. Essentially, as long as your target isn't Malekith, there shouldn't be anyone Tyrion can't trade with if you put enough work into it. Now, I'm not putting him any higher, mainly because he's a little bit one note. You just do shitloads of trading and income building spam. Plus, it can take quite some time to wrangle the donuts under control these days, so it'll take him quite a while to reach final form. Add on the near constant raids from the Dark Elves later in the game, and even if you do have millions of gold coming in, you'll need to spend lots to keep it safe, meaning it does tend to balance out in the end. Next up we have Morgur. The Beastmen might be a faction which you didn't expect to see here, but they are without a doubt one of the most overpowered factions in the game, and that goes all the way to their income. Of course, they pay no recruitment or upkeep costs, so essentially have no constant expenditure. Yes, they do have to pay for Horde and Hearthstone buildings, but if that's all they have to worry about, it's hardly a bother. Add on the fact that their entire campaign is about constantly raising settlements which can net them a stupid amount of gold depending on the target, and they can very quickly snowball out of control as far as income is concerned. Now yes, Dread can slow them down and stop them being that strong, but we're not counting that since this list is all about money. I went with Morgur since you can get cheaper Horde buildings, meaning your main source of expense is reduced, but if you want to make the argument of Taurox, I could see that too. I'm not placing any of the Beastmen any higher than here, since the way they earn gold is very limited. If they stop battling, they stop earning basically anything, so it's very reliant on constant fighting. This isn't a problem with the Beastmen playstyle, but still compared to other factions, it makes them a little bit weaker in comparison. Next up we have Sigvald, and this is another faction you probably wouldn't have expected, but the Warriors of Chaos are another of the most broken factions in the game, and that extends to their income. Now, unlike the Beastmen, they do pay recruitment and upkeep, but also unlike the Beastmen, they also have a lot of options for reliable income alongside their massive amounts from constant battling. First of all, the Vassals of Norsca. You know the drill, you get Dark Forts, vassalize a tribe, give them a load of settlements, and take your cut at the end. That's all well and good until you finally leave Norsca, and that's why I'm going with Rabgod himself. Siggy's sultry seduction allows him to steal the Slaanesh vassalization mechanic, meaning he can't just vassalize Norsca, he can vassalize everybody. Now yeah, it takes some time and some little bits of work, but get a few heroes on the go and it hardly takes any time at all. Add on the Dark Fortress income buildings, which not only provide a tasty amount of gold per turn, but also increase sacking and battle income faction-wide, and you have a respite for a crazy earning potential stacking up over time. He's not getting any higher, mainly due to the fact that despite his extremely high earning potential, you're still likely to be in the red almost all game long if you're expanding quickly. This is fine since you make up the difference battling and stay well ahead of run into problems, but it's still something to consider and means you're a lot more battle reliant than most. However, if you want to instead have high energy potential, you should check out Holy. You probably don't know this, but I have a pretty sensitive stomach. I can look at a bowl of hot sauce and I have to go running off to little Colonel's room in no time. This means that caffeine is one of those things that I have to be extremely careful with. Too much, too fast, and I'm sat on the throne, probably also having a panic attack. But when I say Holy has some of the smoothest energy out of anything I've tried, I mean it. One scoop, 500 ml of water, shaken, not stirred, and it's a great way to cap off my morning and keeps me energized all the way throughout to the end of the day. No big spike where I feel like I've been jabbed with adrenaline, and no massive crash where I feel like I've just run a marathon, just a smooth, underlying pep to keep me focused. Plus, they use all natural sweeteners and colours which also tend to agree with me just fine, so none of those awful stomach cramps you get from too many artificial flavours. If you in any way have a sensitive system, Holy is by far the best choice when it comes to this sort of thing, and trust me, I've tried pretty much all of them. Plus, if you really don't like caffeine, they also make iced tea and hydrate drinks. Hydrate is a great pairing when working out since it tastes great, keeps you hydrated and stocked up on electrolytes which you lose like crazy when you're sweating. Iced tea is honestly just a tasty treat, but all three are guilt-free with no sugar, 20 calories per serving, and full of ingredients that are actually kind of good for you. If you want my recommendations, Raspberry Raptor is my go-to for energy, Cherry Hydrate is extremely cherry in all the right ways, and Acai and Hibiscus is incredibly sweet and tasty without being overpowering. So if you want to check any of these out, pick up a starter set at the link below and use code Colonel5 for £5 off your first order. Then if you want to come back for more, use code Colonel for 10% off every order. I genuinely enjoy Holy and I really hope you do too. One more time, check them out at the link below and give it a try, and thanks to Holy for sponsoring the video. Next up, Count Noctilus. Now I could have picked any of the vampires, but I feel like Noctilus is the best overall, so is the obvious choice if I'm going to have any of them. I feel like this choice may surprise some people, but follow my reasoning and see where you land. So the Vampire Coast Legendary Lords can use shipbuilding, which means they can recruit their entire roster wherever they are without the need for recruitment buildings. Alongside this, they can inhabit pretty much any settlement they want and build up regions full of income buildings. This means you can roam the map, taking settlements as you go, and only focus on income without compromising on recruiting capability. Now yes, your other lords can't do this unless you get some of those from the research tree or confederate the others somehow. But if you just gift armies to new lords and recruit using hordes, it doesn't really matter. Add on the fact they have extremely relaxed climate preferences and they're just absurdly easy to make mountains of gold with in no time. I mean, they also have pirate coves, treasure hunting, that hoard of bountiful treasure right that is pretty strong, but let's be honest, they all kind of suck, so you can just ignore these and be swimming in cash. Next we have Fae Enchantress, and despite my dislike of Bretonnia, I can't deny that they have one of the most powerful economies in the game. It's stupidly easy to make a ridiculous amount of gold from farming or industry, and it doesn't even take that much time to come online. Add on the fact that most of their early armies are dirt cheap, and you have a faction that can very quickly rack up an insane amount of gold. Fae is perhaps the best at this since she starts right in the middle of Bretonnia and has an increased peasant capacity right out the gate. She can trade with a huge number of factions, do the usual Bretonnian confederation to gain a massive amount of territory and resources, and whilst doing all of this, she doesn't have too many threats aside from Grom, Ikit, and the Beastmen. You really don't have to try that hard to quickly get on a roll with her, and even without vows, you'll very easily be able to afford any unit you want in no time. There's not really much else to say. You pretty much just get a load of cash for existing. The only reason she's not getting higher is because it's pretty uninteractive and some factions just do it better. Coming in third place, we have Thorgrim. Now you might be surprised to see Thorgrim so high since he is so short, and also since he's essentially another Karl. A strong Order-tied faction with good trade connections, but nothing all that special. Well, I would argue that Thorgrim's no-nonsense approach is what makes him quite so powerful. The dwarves are able to build resource buildings to a higher level than anyone else, meaning much more resources and income, aka income and income, since all you do is trade anyway. They can also build all their own income infrastructure buildings to higher levels than anybody else, so your income-focused provinces can make a boatload more than anyone else. They can also make dwarven ale from their control buildings, and their control increases their income, so another win there. Add on Thorgrim's small faction changes to make for far more powerful commandments, meaning extra income from all that, and this faction can very quickly be swimming in lakes of gold. Now yes, the dwarf armies are quite expensive, so you do end up spending quite a lot of this gold, but even so, they can be incredibly rich with minimal effort, so it hardly matters. Plus their elite troops only enable them to collect more territory, so it all comes up gold in the end. If you get to the late game, I think, against everyone we've talked about so far, Thorgrim has the highest potential. It may start out a little bit rough with expensive armies, but once you get a few provinces under your control, it quickly turns around and just doesn't ever stop. Coming in second place, we have Orion. Any of the Wood Elves could be in this with the exception of Dryker, but I chose Orion since I find him to be the easiest by far. The Wood Elf campaign revolves around capturing each of the magical forests spread throughout the map and leveling them up with rituals. That isn't what makes them cracked, however. The buildings that you can choose inside of these magical forests, that's what makes them cracked. So you can use the deep routes to get around the map, so as long as you have recruitment available somewhere, you can just recruit in that one province and dispatch armies from there, meaning every settlement can be focused on income. Add on the fact that they, for some reason, have some of the most cracked economy buildings in the entire game, and the Wood Elves very quickly spiral out of control to having one of the best economies in the entire game. Even without trade, they're pretty rich, but with it, they're on a whole other level. And need I remind you that this is all whilst controlling only a handful of settlements at the absolute most. They don't need anything but the forests, which are borderline impossible to take down for enemies, meaning you can get all this cash and it's essentially risk-free. You only really need a few armies teleporting around to capture and level up each one, so your expenditure is also extremely low. All in all, it's just a crazy powerful campaign that really doesn't take that long to get going. And coming in first place, we have the Changeling. First of all, this is one of the easiest campaigns in the game, full stop, so jot that down. Secondly, you end up going all over the map, fighting anyone and everyone, and as long as you don't play carelessly, you shouldn't ever lose a battle or get yourself into a sticky situation. And thirdly, all of those cults you make along the way may not pay so much to start off with, but once you get on a roll, they'll be insane. Early on, Parasitic will be okay for some cash, but later on, the endgame players will have made themselves known. Building symbiotic buildings and leeching off their income will result in a massive amount of gold. Obviously, you can build these cults yourself through battling, but once you have enough, they'll just start spreading for you, and as long as you manage your discoverability, which is hardly a challenge, they'll basically never get discovered or destroyed. If you spam these symbiotic spread building and income leech, you'll have them all over the map without lifting a finger and have a ridiculous amount of gold per turn. What you'll do with all this gold, I'm not sure, since this campaign is stupidly easy with a single army, but this isn't the best designed campaigns video, so that probably doesn't matter. Now yes, this is a bit of a slow burn, and early on you'll probably be pretty poor, but once you get on a roll, you won't really be able to stop even if you wanted to. It's all the best parts about the Skaven Undercities turned up to 11. You rake in an unfathomable amount of gold and do none of the work to really earn it. It's a true capitalist dream. You can paint the entire map without having to travel around it thanks to random spreading, and can steal from everyone with ease. And that's my list. Let me know who you think has the most overpowered economy in the comments below. Like, subscribe, become a member to see yourself in the credits, and if you want more Warhammer 3 videos, then check out this video all about the Cracker Drac modded faction.